Ivy Valentine subscribes to Mark Yoon, so should you. Enjoy your treat!
With every new iteration of a Soul Calibur game, we always hear these similar kind of aspects around what characters are going to be in. Are there going to be new characters? Are there going to be returning characters? What about the characters that weren't in the last ones? This is pretty similar across the board when it comes to any fighting games, really. But in particular, Soul Calibur has a very small but robust amount of characters. So depending on which game you're playing, you are pretty much guaranteed to see the same characters repeat themselves a lot, especially from Soul Edge up until the current game. But there are new characters that are introduced in each one, and I hear a lot of fan theories and speculation about like what new characters are going to be presented, and usually when I hear the top of a conversation around this, it's a little daunting. There's a great number of people who don't really separate Soul Calibur from Street Fighter or Tekken, and they expect to have a huge amount of new characters, each coming from different countries or different continents, each wielding different specific culturally appropriate weaponry and stuff like that. But when it comes to Soul Calibur, it's a little bit different. For example, the Korean characters I talked about before, they don't even use Korean weapons. They use like Chinese swords. There's a lot of, like, with the exception of Sung Mina, but she actually uses like a palace guard spear as opposed to like what she would normally be wearing or using. So the clothing is kind of off. Like, it just, with Soul Calibur, it seems like they're not as culturally like intuitive as some of the other franchises, or maybe they just have a smaller team and don't do as much research, or maybe they just care about how cool the character looks as opposed to how accurate a character looks. This can be said for a lot of the characters within the game, especially like Talim and other characters as well. But when we're talking about new characters specifically returning, the conversation shifts and changes around what country they're going to be from or what weapons they're going to be using, which is more appropriately titled, apparently, to how many new characters we're going to get. Because across the Soul Calibur franchise, the most new characters that we gotten was probably Soul Calibur V, and that's because they replaced them with similar versions that were already previously in the roster, aka Taki for Natsu and Shiba for Kilik, and so on and so forth. That's just how it goes. I would argue even Patroclus and Pyrrha, but it's neither here nor there. Whenever it comes to other games, like let's look at Soul Calibur VI, for example, which is the newest entry in the series relatively to now. We had, Grow, we had Aswell. There wasn't a very robust amount of new characters. There are some newer characters, but mostly it was the returning roster from Soul Edge or Soul Calibur 1. So that's to be expected. And we, with the DLC, did get new, not new characters, but characters returning again from older titles. And now I think the only ones that we're actually missing, besides like Li Long and, you know, Arthur and Chester and bonus characters from 3 and stuff like that, the main roster characters we're still missing are Rock, Aeon, and Yoon-Song. So those 3 characters are characters that I expect to see back. However, new characters can be in here, but the problem is that Soul Calibur is a very narrative-based game. Unlike other fighting games where it's just like the story is kind of secondary and you have these cool characters that are just in unique situations, Soul Calibur is very much based on, here it's like alternative history, like kind of thing with like mysticism and like sorcery and stuff thrown in there. So it's like, where we want to see this fantasy go? Like, how does a story unfold? How does a narrative unfold? And what characters are the most relevant for that? The characters kind of fit the story in Soul Calibur as opposed to vice versa, where you have a cool character and you create the story around that character. This is both good and bad, but we're not talking about narrative today. We're just talking about the new characters. So from Season 2, if you've played Season 2, you've seen pretty much the lead up to the Swords and Shepherds. If you've read the encyclopedia, you know about characters like Svi and Viola, who were already mentioned and talked about and hinted at. So we are getting some characters that are probably returning from 5 and some original characters from Soul Edge and Soul Calibur 1 that are also returning. I'm also expecting to see some non-playable characters get playable versions. I'm still iffy on whether Ishka Act is actually going to be fully playable or play similarly to how she was as a boss fight in Season 2 of Soul Calibur 6. Or if we're going to have characters like Curtis, who is now Malfested, coming back, or possibly altered variations of characters such as Amy to Viola or Amy and Viola, things of that nature. but I'm assuming that we're only going to be adding around maybe 1 to 3 new actual original characters. I would rather stay closer to 2 than go to 3, but I just don't know at this point. So I think that, like, whether you want to see your favorite character from your favorite region or your favorite country come into play, I think we need to get the characters correct that are actually in the game first before we start adding on to a bunch of things. I really like how some games like Tekken utilize it, where every character nonsensically speaks their own language, which is really awesome to see. But then, like, when it comes to communicating with each other, I guess just everybody in the Tekken universe knows every language known to man. So that's kind of an oddity, but it's good because those characters stick closer to relevance to their culturally appropriate avatars than, like, most other games would do. Street Fighter is like an exaggerated cartoonish version of that. Tekken does it more realistically in my mind, and also I think that Soul Calibur is just really bad when it comes to representing characters from certain specific regions. So when people come to me and they ask me, hey, I would like to see like an African Zulu warrior or something like that using like some kind of new weapon, I'm like, all right, that's cool, but the narrative doesn't really dictate that we're going to go in any kind of specific area like that. We usually pretty much stick to Europe and Asia, like Southeast Asia in particular, when it comes to Soul Calibur and like what we're where the story takes place. It's not like a worldwide story like a lot of other fighting games seem to entail. It's very close-knit to those two regions specifically. The only thing really breaking that rule would be, like, I guess the Americas with, like, Rock, but, like, we don't know if he's actually going to be venturing to the Americas or staying in Europe in this new iteration of his character coming up, or whether or not, like, Zasalamel, like, doesn't, like, cares about, like, America or anything at that point, like we've seen hinted at in some ending scenes and whatnot. But I just think that, like, they're still going to focus on the story and the narrative and stick to those two regions. So I don't think we're going to be seeing any characters from, like, any other continents, for example, or any other smaller regions, because what would that story entail for them? The only thing that, like, you could argue is that since they're looking for, the Swords and the Shepherds are looking for the lost shards of Soul Edge for Nightmare to bring back Algol or do whatever they're going to do. I don't know where they specifically would have landed, but usually, even if they could have gone worldwide, they'll come up with some kind of, like, off-screen way to be like, well, so-and-so already gathered this many and they had to go here to get them. Like, they went to Calcutta and they found one or something like that. It's not going to be specifically, like, region-specific. I mean, I could be wrong, and, like, part of me hopes that, like, I'm wrong a little bit, that this is more robust and much larger in scale than it has been in the past. But even when we've come up against enemies such as Algol, who is, like, a universe-ending threat, you know, the creator of the swords in the past timeline, we still didn't really have, like, any new characters from any new specific areas. Like, the biggest boost to new characters that I remember or I recall was, like, Soul Calibur 3 when we got, like, Setsuka and Tira and stuff like that. And then 5 when they just, like, replaced characters with younger versions of those characters. So I don't know exactly, like, what we should expect from this for new characters and new roster, but I think the actual truth lies in Season 2 of Soul Calibur 6, so go back and replay that, and also make sure you're looking into the Encyclopedia and the Soul Chronicles for any clues. That's where you find out information about, like, Zwei and whatnot. Libra of Souls has a lot of hidden characters, such as, like, Arthur and Chester and whatnot, but they're not going to be playable, I don't believe, unless they actually give us, like, some kind of, like, character creation clothes for them or something. But, like, generally speaking, they're just, like, alternate colors of existing characters already. Like, Arthur is the blonde-haired version of Mitsurugi, stuff like that. But I don't know, there's a lot to this topic and a lot to this subject that I may be missing, so I want to turn the question over to you guys, and I would like to talk about this in the comment section or on the Discord so we can bring up new information with each other. I also want to talk about the poll that was on the last video for Soul Calibur, and the poll that I stated was pretty simple this time. I actually just said, how are you planning on purchasing Soul Calibur 7? 60% of people voted for the PlayStation 5, 16% of people said for the Xbox Series X or the Xbox Series, 15% of people voted that they're going to do it digitally or PC, and 9% of people voted that they're going to buy more than one copy on more than one platform, and this is out of 157 votes, so take that for what you will. I'm certainly probably going to buy it digitally and on PlayStation 5. I'm not exactly sure yet if I'm going to get it on Xbox. It just depends on if enough of the community wants me to get on that also so we can play together. And I am planning on doing some more stuff on PC, so with that said, we'll just leave that there and talk about that again in the future. But if you want to talk about the next voting poll and see your comments on screen, then at the end of every video on the community tab, I actually list a poll for the next video, so go ahead and take part in that. And like I said, feel free to join the Discord and just open the conversation up in the comment section down below. And as I always say, guys, I love it, thank you,
and thank you.